Hello, and welcome to my dorm. I'm coming to you today because I want to talk about the burnout within the veterinary field. And I apologize for the low quality equipment, it's the best I got, so it's what we're going to work with. If you don't know, burnout is a feeling of emotional exhaustion that someone gets because of their work. Typically, it happens because someone is feeling like they're losing control of their work, feeling like they're not getting properly compensated, or feeling like they don't have a sense of community in their job. And for veterinarians, about 50% of them have been shown to experience high levels of burnout. And this makes sense because on the daily, veterinarians are having to deal with sick animals, making sure those animals are getting the proper treatments, and making sure owners are making good decisions for their animals. But why does burnout even happen, and what does it even matter? Well, lucky for you, I have some of the answers. Not all of them, but I can provide some. Burnout happens for a variety of reasons, and a large part of that is the financial stress that veterinarians are put under during their years of school. In order to become a vet, you need a lot of schooling, and those school years don't come cheap. A 4-year tuition can cost somewhere between $550,000 to $436,000.
And that's only including the years at vet school, not considering the undergrad degree they need.
And those prices are not decreasing. In fact, they are increasing by quite a lot. In 2011, the average debt a veterinary student came out with was around $109,000. And in 2022, it increased to about $147,000. What? Not only is it terrifying to have those debts linger over your head, but if you want to take some time off as a veterinarian because you're feeling stressed out or you're feeling like you're starting to experience burnout, you really can't because you constantly need to make up these debts by working. Especially when you consider the debt-to-income ratio for a veterinarian is about 2 to 1. But massive debts aren't the only thing vets need to worry about. Their workload is super heavy, especially after the pandemic hit. I'm sure you've heard about pandemic puppies. Everyone went out to go buy a dog in order to maintain their sanity during the pandemic. I mean, just look at this guy. How could you not want one of them? They're literally adorbs. While this was great for the people who were stuck at home, it was a different story for the veterinarians. They already had to deal with so much before the pandemic, with all the annoyed owners, sick animals, all the appointments, co-worker conflicts, information mismanagement, overwhelming workloads, personal issues. It was a lot, to say the least. So when you put on top of that more pets, weird pandemic work conditions, and the fact that the veterinary field was already short-staffed, you've created perfect conditions for people to get overworked and overwhelmed real fast. Even though these were overwhelming conditions, you couldn't change the fact that they were happening. So veterinarians were magically expected to meet the sudden increase in demand. So not only did they have heavier workloads, they also had higher expectations they needed to meet, which understandably could push anyone on the verge of a breakdown and cause them to lose compassion for a job that they might have once loved. The most pressing cause for veterinary burnout is probably these heavy workloads that are caused by the high demand for them and the shortage of veterinarians in the field. If there were more vets, the workload could be more evenly spread out, and if someone did start to feel the effects of burnout come on, they could take some time off and focus on their well-being for a while. Burnout has been a known issue in the veterinary field for a long time. So because of that, you'd expect that clinics really prioritize veterinarians' well-being and really care about how they're doing, right? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. About 32% of veterinarians say that they think that people care for those who are struggling with mental illness, which is great. That's about a third of veterinarians who think that people care for those who are struggling. But when you compare that with the general public, about 60% of working people in the US who aren't veterinarians agree with that same sentiment. So that's an issue. Veterinarians are so overworked, and there's so much pressure that's put upon them that they're practically working themselves to the bone to meet all the demands. So it only makes sense that they feel emotionally exhausted after that. So for somebody to feel that much pressure and go through that exhaustion, and then to look around and think, well, if I spoke up about how I was feeling, no one would even care, that is a problem. That is terrible and a horrible culture, and we need to acknowledge that that is not a good culture and it needs to get changed. That kind of isolation is the driving force that propels even the smallest amounts of burnout to something that can be unbearable, and nobody should need to suffer in silence like that. So there's a lot of external factors that help us understand why burnout is so prevalent in the veterinary field. From the financial burdens to the heavy workloads to the culture itself, there's a lot that contributes to burnout. But also the mentality of a lot of veterinarians also leads them to get burnt out easily too. Miriam Varela and Isabel Correa did a study that found high levels of burnout can be correlated with high emotional empathy, high personal justice, low professional identification, few years of experience, and heavy workloads.
But why does that even matter?
Well, it matters because veterinarians have to go through a lot of hardships in their line of work. 29% said that they have to put down healthy animals multiple times a year for reasons they think are unjust, and 25% said that they have owners who don't opt in for euthanization soon enough multiple times a year. So if a person has high emotional empathy or high personal justice and has to be the hand that kills an innocent animal or has to watch an animal suffer because of its horrible quality of life, it's no doubt that that's going to cause them to feel a lot of guilt. And that's not the kind of thing that you can leave behind at the office when you clock out for the day. That kind of guilt follows you home. That kind of guilt keeps you up at night. When an owner wants to put their pet down for a reason that a vet might think is unjust, the vets don't have a choice. They have to go through with it. And a lot of people become vets because of their high personal justice and high emotional empathies. They truly believe that they can help animals and make a difference in their lives. So to finally reach your goal as a vet, only to be met with this unjust work, it makes sense why it might make a person want to leave their job or lead them to burnout. All of these things are really hard to go through, but what really makes clinical burnout in the veterinary field a horrendous thing is the effects of it. It's been shown that compared to the general public, male vets are 2.1 times more likely to commit suicide, and female vets are 3.5 times more likely. I chose this topic because I want to be a vet in my future, and I've struggled with mental health in the past, so I thought it'd be a pretty good thing to know why this happens at such frequent rates. So when I came across this statistic, it honestly terrified me. To see the sheer magnitude of effect that burnout has in the field is insane. Being 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide than the average person is crazy. And that's not something that is a coincidence or can be ignored. That is a very major issue. Because that's not just a number. When someone ends up committing suicide, it's not just another thing to add to the statistics. That's a doctor in the veterinary community that has lost their life, a valuable member. That is a family who's lost their mother or father. That's somebody's best friend that they'll never get to speak to again. That's somebody's love of their life that they won't get to live the rest of their life with. It's a major problem. And not only that, it's avoidable. Burnout is something that can be avoided. It doesn't have to keep continuing like this. And which is why we need to put an effort into stopping it. But it's not only mental ramifications that burnout is having, but also physical ones. Even if you're able to push past your years as a vet and retire, you're still going to feel those effects. It's been shown that high levels of burnout correlate with autonomic imbalances, which that can increase your risk for hypertension, heart disease, or even type 2 diabetes. If you are a vet and you end up experiencing these symptoms, you simply cannot function in the workplace. If you have heart palpitations or symptoms of dementia, you can't properly go throughout those long work days or think critically about your patients. It's just not possible. And if you end up retiring as a veterinarian, these are symptoms that are just haunting you, even though you've spent your entire life helping animals in need so tirelessly. So it's clear that burnout has a lot of detrimental effects to the veterinary community, but just because these effects are so harsh doesn't mean there aren't solutions to them. For example, the heavy workload that veterinarians experience might be able to be lightened if we're able to ease some of the information chaos that happens in the health field. Whether it be too much information, a lack of information, conflicting information chaos causes a lot of confusion and wastes a lot of time within the veterinary field. And a lot of this might stem from the reliance of paper documentation in clinics. Paper documentation can be illegible, go missing, take a lot of time to pull up, be hard to file, and if I was a vet and I couldn't find basic information about my client, I would be rather frustrated. And also, this takes away valuable time that vets need in their already strenuous days. When compared with electronic documentation and record keeping, the use of paper just becomes inferior, but still 20% of vet clinics still rely on fully using paper documentation, and 51% rely on the use of a mix of paper documentation and electronic documentation. Paper documents might take 10 or 20 minutes to sift through while you're looking for information about your client, but electronic documents allow you to securely keep documents so you know you won't lose them, and also pull them up quickly so you spare yourself time and frustration. This could help ease the workload in a lot of ways by giving back valuable time that vets need, and also sparing them some frustration of dealing with paper documents. But of course, the heavy workloads aren't the only cause for burnout within the veterinary field. Universities and colleges might be able to ease some of the financial burdens placed upon students right off the bat by possibly taking after Purdue University of Veterinary Medicine. Purdue is one of the cheapest, if not the most cheap vet school in America, but don't get me wrong, it's still expensive. However, they've been able to achieve being one of the cheapest by implementing two strategies: freezing their tuition and increasing scholarships given out to students. Vet schools are expensive to run, so we might not be able to reduce tuition, but if this was the precedent set for all vet schools across America, this could really help ease some of the financial burdens that stress veterinarians out so much. However, even if these strategies were implemented, there would still be a lot of costs that veterinarians need to cover, which is why Dr. Julia Miller of the Veterinary College of Cornell University recommends government intervention. She recommends that legislation needs to get passed that adjusts student loan interest rates, which this might help the debt-to-income ratio be reduced from 2 to 1 to somewhere closer to 1.4 to 1, which would greatly help veterinarians and ease their minds with some of this financial stress. Both reducing the information chaos and financial burdens that vets experience require a lot of institutional change and a lot of time, which for some vets, they don't have that time. So something that they can do right now to help initiate some change is take some personal initiative in their own well-being. The Mayo Clinic suggests that if someone is noticing burnout within themselves, to look at the options available to them, possibly talking to the boss about their concerns, looking to find the major issues that need to be addressed, or if necessary, quitting their job and finding a new one. They also say that seeking help through friends, families, or coworkers can really help those going through burnout cope with the situation that they're in. And also practicing mindfulness, exercise, and good sleep habits can really help ease symptoms of burnout. An environment needs to be created where vets feel like they are heard and that they are able to reach out if they are feeling symptoms of burnout. While some major institutional changes, like changing from paper documentation to electronic or getting government involved in helping with debts, might take a lot of time, it does not take a lot of time to ask somebody how they're doing and create that environment where they feel comfortable reaching out. A YouTuber, Bella Vet, also expresses how important it is to prioritize your own mental health when you're in the veterinary field. She was a former ER veterinarian who struggled heavily with her mental health throughout her time there. She lost 15 pounds in the span of 6 months, said she was crying every night due to the stress and pressure she was under. She said that she wasn't given measurable goals to achieve, and it made having a sustainable work-life balance practically impossible. In her time in the ER, she was working 12 to 16-hour shifts, yet it still wasn't good enough for her mentors, which is what led her to feeling so much burnout. She eventually ended up leaving her job as an ER vet to go to a clinic that was more mental health conscientious. And she expresses how important it is to create that environment where you feel like you can reach out and where you feel like you're important and needed in that field. No vet should have to struggle alone, and fostering that community of openness and understanding is necessary if we want to help the issue of burnout within the veterinary field. This issue obviously isn't going to fix overnight. It's something that's really complex and has a lot of issues that need to be dealt with. But from all the hours of research that I've done, what I truly believe is the best thing that somebody can do for the veterinary field right now if they're concerned is just reach out to a vet if you know one, or if you have one in your life. Make sure that they know that they have a shoulder that they can lean on when they start experiencing these symptoms of burnout, and make sure that they know that they're not isolated within their community. But that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for everything. Bye.